Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with beef and barley stew. That's right, if you were hoping for a complicated, hard-to-make recipe, you're going to be very disappointed with this. Because while it does take a little bit of time to make, it is very easy and the results are beyond delicious. And to make up for the fact this is so simple, I'm going to show you a very cool trick later for how to create some delicious edible snow for the top of your winter stews. So stay tuned for that. But for now, let's go ahead and get started. And for this, we're going to need some beef shank. So I have 2 pounds of beef shank. That's 2 nice thick slices. And we're going to go ahead and generously season that with kosher salt and freshly ground black pepper. And by the way, while I'm doing this, let me make a point about choosing your beef shank. Ideally, what you're looking for is a smaller bone with marrow going all the way through the center. All right, you see this one? You see how big that bone is? And if we flip it, there is some marrow on that side, but not all the way through. So not only did I pay for bone instead of meat, I cheated myself out of some bone marrow, which is one of the things that gives this dish such a great flavor. So pay attention when you're at the butcher's counter and make sure you're getting some good ones. And once our beef shank's been seasoned generously on both sides, we're going to brown that very well in our soup pot over high heat in a little bit of vegetable oil. And one tip here, if your shanks start to curl up in the pan, just slice through that membrane that goes around the outside, and that will help it stay flat as it browns. So like I said, we're going to brown those very thoroughly on both sides over high heat, at which point we will remove those and reserve them. We'll then quickly turn our heat down to medium and add 1 diced onion, along with a big pinch of salt, and we'll saute that onion on medium heat for 4 or 5 minutes until it starts to turn translucent, and it should look all nice and golden brown. And by the way, most of that color is coming from the fond on the bottom of the pan. And I know when you think of deglazing, you think of liquid, but actually we just use those onions to deglaze the pot. And then once our onions are looking like that, we will add some chopped garlic. And as usual, we'll just give that about a 1-minute sizzle. We certainly don't want to brown the garlic. So like I said, we'll cook that for about 1 minute, at which point we'll add some tomato paste. All right, a couple tablespoons of tomato paste. We'll stir that in. And what's going to happen, because that tomato paste has a lot of sugar and acid in it, it's going to stick to and caramelize to the bottom of the pan, which is a good thing. Don't be worried. Well, actually, let me take that back. You should be worried if it gets too dark. Okay, so don't walk away. Just keep stirring, keep cooking on medium heat until your tomato takes on kind of a dark brick red color. And as soon as it goes from that to a brown, you have to add your stock. Okay, so right here, I'm going to pour in my chicken stock. That's going to stop any caramelization and keep it from going any further. So make sure you have your stock or broth right next to the pot when you're doing this step. So we'll dump in our liquid. You could also use beef stock or veal stock or even water if you have to. And then along with the stock, we will also add some celery and carrots. And by the way, if the color on those carrots looks a little different, that's because I bought some heirloom red carrots. And what's the difference between those and regular carrots? About $3 a pound. We're also going to add a bay leaf and a little pinch of dry rosemary. And absolutely you can use fresh, but usually for these slow cooking stew type things, I do prefer the flavor profile of the dried herb. It tends to be a little bit on the mustier side. And I know that doesn't necessarily sound like an advantage, but it is. And then we can go ahead and add our beef shank back in. And of course, nestle it down. Ideally, we want all that meat covered in liquid. And there should just be enough. And of course, it goes without saying, any accumulated juices will and must be returned to the pot. And then from here on, we're using standard stew procedure. We will raise our heat to medium-high and bring this up to a simmer, at which point we'll reduce it to low to maintain a very gentle, very slow simmer. And once you've gotten your heat dialed in, and it's bubbling gently, we will cover that and cook it until that meat is fork tender, which, depending on the size of your beef shank, is going to take 2 or 3 hours. All right, mine took about 3. You'll know when it's done because you're going to uncover it, and you're going to give it the old poka with a fork. And right here, mine was perfectly tender. Also, of course, a big clue is that it's falling apart. And once you determine yours is done and tender, we'll remove that meat and bone to a bowl, and we can move on to the final phase, the cooking of the barley. I got myself a nice package of Italian barley. In fact, this one was being sold as Italian naked barley, which I have absolutely no idea what that refers to. But anyway, I figured why not, and I gave it a try. And I'm going to add in 1 generous half cup and stirred that in. And you probably want to adjust your heat to about medium here. We want to maintain a pretty enthusiastic simmer, not a boil, but a good simmer. And all we're going to do is simmer that until your barley's tender. All right, mine took about 45 minutes, but it could be an hour for you, it could be more. And just like if you were cooking risotto or pearl couscous or rice or another grain, you're going to decide how far to take it. Personally, I want mine tender with just a little bit of texture to it. And when you determine your barley is perfectly cooked, We are carefully going to slide our meat back in and nestle it down. And all we're going to do to finish this off is turn our heat down to low, cover that pot, and just let it sit there for about 5 or 10 minutes until that beef heats through, at which point we're pretty much ready to serve. And I said pretty much because you got to taste it. Might need a little more salt. Of course, you're the chief of your barley and beef, so taste and adjust. And once you have that seasoned just right, it's time to dish up. And I'm going to finish mine off with a little bit of freshly chopped parsley. For these kind of slow-cooked stews, I do like a little bit of fresh herb at the end just to brighten things up. And then as I teased earlier, we're going to finish this off with a little bit of horseradish snow. Just some fresh horseradish root, which you can grate over using a fine cheese grater. And if you're not familiar with it, it looks like this. Kind of ugly, but you peel off that skin, and it has a beautiful white inside, which you can grate over using a microplane. And by the way, that's actually pretty easy to find in the supermarket. Just go to that section in the produce department where they have all the stuff that nobody buys. It'll be right there. You can't miss it. So we'll grate some of that over, which of course is going to mimic freshly fallen snow. And at that point, our beef and barley stew is done. And I'm always hungry filming these videos. Well, actually, I'm always hungry all the time. But I could not wait to dig into this. And I was beyond thrilled with how this came out. That gorgeous tender beef. That sauce really gets enhanced by all that bone marrow that kind of melts into it as it cooks. And then, of course, we have our barley with that beautiful, slightly sweet, slightly nutty, earthy flavor. Just such a perfect pairing with that sticky beef. And above and beyond looking cool, that little touch of horseradish really amplifies the flavors. And I really do love living in California. But this is one of those recipes that as I'm eating it, I actually miss the snow. But then I remember shoveling the driveways, and that quickly passes. But anyway, the point is, if you're in the mood for something warm and comforting, or you just want a little change of pace from the corn, rice, wheat, potato routine, then I really hope you give this beef and barley stew a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.